Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Really looking forward to talking to you. This is a topic that I have not touched at all, I don't think, in the 5 years that I've had the podcast. You know, the topic of grief and spirituality and clairsenses, which I'm sure we'll get into. But why don't we start by having you introduce yourself to the audience and tell them about what you do, because it's very unique.
Okay. I'm a medium, an intuitive, and I'm an inspirational speaker and an author. I started out having a near-death experience at 4.5 years old. I was locked in an unplugged freezer in a garage. And when I came back from that, I was able to see spirits everywhere. It was unbelievable. And I was really actually terrified. I used to cover my head and tell them to go away. I thought they were the boogeymen. But as time went on, it became my normal. I ultimately was visited by them continuously, and I became a counselor for grief and addiction. And then I received my doctorate in divinity, and I work with children who have near-death experiences. So, you know, I've kind of got an array of things I love to do. But at the end of the day, I'm just a healer. That's what I love. That's my heart.
Yeah. I'm curious about the kind of intersection between grief and addiction, if there is one. I've been in recovery for 10 years, so that's
Absolutely.
of particular interest to me.
Absolutely. So I have, you know, in full reveal, I have 2 brothers and a mother who were all in addiction, and they committed suicide. And so, you know, I correlate those 2 things. I think addiction is very painful. It's traumatizing. And it's out of the control of the addict until they recognize they can do something different. And so, and the grief of having to face their experiences and the things that they wish they wouldn't have done, and the shame behind that all correlates together with, you know, the process of letting go of that addiction and becoming everything they're meant to be. So it's very much, you know, intertwined.
Yeah. I always get messages from people who are either sober curious, or they're newly sober, or they're trying to be sober, and kind of this overarching theme in those messages is always about that, you know, how do I deal with the guilt and the remorse and the shame and the traumas that are accrued along the way. And I know for myself, I don't talk about it publicly, but I have a program that helped me to face all of that stuff. But I think that it's so daunting for so many people.
It is. I also am in a program for people who were raised by them. So I understand that verbiage. I really believe that, you know, trying to do it alone, trying to heal yourself alone, trying to face the demons of what, you know, you're holding on to from your past, present, or future. You know, those demons are so powerful that having a support system is imperative in order to feel safe. I think that, unfortunately, addiction is a mind of its own. It's in the corner doing push-ups, ready to come at you. And so having to face all those traumas from the past that you really didn't have control over. You know, any human doesn't have control over the things that we do when we're intoxicated or something's taken us over, is really scary. And so what happens is they flip back into finding a solution, and that solution has always been to use. And so a lot of them go back to that process because it's all they know. Their fear is really strong. So I tell my people that come to me, what you fear, you feed. What you feed, you believe or you perceive, and what you believe and perceive becomes your reality. So the goal is to get rid of the fear base, and we need help doing that. That's not easy. And so when I speak about addiction, I'm always talking about, you know, releasing that fear base. You need to have a support system so that you feel safe. Because it's really about that safety mechanism. Because it's not going to take me over, and I'm not going to have anywhere to turn and no one to talk to and no place to go. And that's what I hear a lot. Like, I have this, you know, all this darkness in my soul. I said, your soul will never be dark. Your soul is precious and perfect, and it's from the spirit world. It's the head is distorted in its thinking. And so, you know, I tell them, you're trying to think your way into right actions to stay sober, and you have to act your way into right thinking to stay sober. So it's very different than what they've been taught or what they've tried to do in the past. You know, I'm going to hold on and I'm going to think my way through it.
Yeah, that's something that was paradigm shifting for me as well. When I got sober, was this idea that I had to act myself into feeling different, period. Not just into being sober. I have to act my way into feeling different still, you know, and that's often contrary action. And, you know, I was overrun by fear, my thinking. That was a big reason, I think, why I initially started drinking and doing drugs when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
And, of all the defects, that's definitely still the one that rears its head most frequently for me, I think. But, I watch for it, and I have practices that I can do. And, I know from
support system.
Yes.
And other things,
yes,
that really work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think grief's involved in that. I think 100%. Number one, addiction, that drug or that alcohol becomes our best friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever the addiction is, whether it be drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever it is, it becomes our best friend because it relieves us of our pain
Mm-hmm.
and our fears and our anxieties. And then it stops working.
Mm-hmm.
And no one knows what to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, the guilt or the grief is very involved in that. And so what I walk people through is facing that grief. It's kind of the same as losing loved ones, especially if they've died from suicide. We go through such shame and guilt. We don't want to tell people because we believe that they'll think we had a bad family or we're bad or why weren't we there? Or why didn't we know? And so we're holding on to all of this pain and suffering instead of reaching out and finding out, what this process needs to be in order to heal ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So I want to rewind a little bit and go back to your near-death experience and, having these spirits visit you.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you maybe recognize that this was something unique? You became unafraid of it, and it sounds like you accepted it. And how did that shift things for you?
I don't know if I ever completely accept it, if I'm in honesty.
Mm-hmm.
I think when people go, how did she know that? I go, how did I know that? But then, and I'll go to work and I'll tell people, I might be making this up. I'm crazy. I'm going to be, this is so bad. And then they'll say to me, when you come out, tell us you feel the same way. And I'll come out and go, I couldn't have known that. How did I know that? So I go through my doubts too. I'm having a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I think about 17 years old is when I recognized that it really was real. And it was from my own experience from losing someone, and they came to me. And so it wasn't outside of me anymore, a stranger. It was right in front of me. And it was someone that I loved that gave me evidence, and I didn't know they had passed. So it was extremely powerful to me to recognize, what was going on inside of me. And I called UCLA at the time was having I don't know what they called it, but a paranormal society, and so to speak. And I called them and they said, oh, you sound like a medium. And I went, what's that? And when they started to tell me, I hung up. I thought, oh, I'm weird. And it's so interesting because my friends of childhood tell me now, we always knew you were weird or something was different about you. We just didn't know what it was. Because my mother, my sister and my brother had this gift, but my mother was put away and put on medications for it.
Wow.
And in my day, you didn't talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother was like, do not talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I didn't come to full circle at a younger age.
Mm-hmm.
It was my abnormally normal. So I didn't know to talk about it at that point. It just was.
Mm-hmm.
When I started to do the grief work and the addiction work, we have a lot of loss in addiction. A lot. We lose a lot of people, unfortunately and sadly. And at that point was when I think I started to say, I know things that I shouldn't know. People are hearing things out of my mouth that they haven't told me, and they're recognizing it. I have to start being honest as I can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so it started there, but it didn't grow for another 15 years to the point that I said, I'm a medium.
Mm-hmm. What is it like for you? I mean, is it you meet someone, you're sitting there, you're talking to them, and you're getting these intuitive thoughts or messages, or you're seeing something? Does it happen all the time? Does it happen infrequently? Is it only when you kind of prepare yourself to talk to somebody in that way and access that? Like, what is that experience like for you?
Well, it's always there, but I've learned to turn the dial up and down. So I turn down the dial when I'm in a situation where I know it's not appropriate or haven't been asked. And sometimes I don't, though. I have to admit it. Sometimes I'll be at a restaurant and go, who's with that person? Just because I want to. But most of the time, I turn it down. And then when it's time, it just seems to click in. But I can feel myself. It's like being on an elevator or something, and I just go, and I'm in. I'm very good at reading souls. So when I say that, what I mean is I'm very intuitive to who people are pretty instantly. And I can tell their journey pretty quickly. that comes from them. And also studying it for so long and practicing this, this gift, because we all have it. We just don't practice it. We deny it a lot. And with mediumship, I think it's just, I'm so in tune with my losses and my grief. And I've always been a person, I put away my limiting beliefs, let me say it that way, and I became present. And when you're present, you see and feel things. And I began teaching it. And so I had to really recognize, what is that process? And that's how it's, that's how it took off.
I don't know what your experience is with this, but I would imagine that it's still kind of taboo. I mean, I think that so many people have this perspective that is, we are humans. This is it. We can only see things through the lens of our own human experience and our own human mind. So any other realm is just unfathomable. And I think because of that, people just reject it. So how has that been for you?
If I'm really honest, it hasn't happened to me very often at all. And I think it's because of my background. So when you're a therapist and, you deal with grief and addiction, these things, people give you a little bit more respect in it. What they're picturing is you setting up house and doing the woo-woo, crystal ball, palm reading kind of thing. And that's not how I work. So once they meet me, they see it differently. They see that my goal is to help people heal. But mediumship is taboo. And I think mediums have created that. They didn't know what to do with their gift. And so it became that woo-woo, scary out there. They call them grief vampires. And I tell people we really are grief vampires. And I'm going to tell you why. We suck in all of that grief. They see it differently. We're taking from these people, but what we're doing is we're carrying a space for these people and we're taking it on, and then we're trying to help them heal. So in essence, we are, grief vampires in that sense. What they mean by it is something negative. Once people come to me who don't believe, I would say a good 98% of them walk out saying, I can't believe that I believe. I'm blown away right now. You couldn't have known those things. That wasn't anywhere. You couldn't find it. And that's what they think you're doing. And I'm sure some mediums do that. I won't say they don't. But when you have integrity and character and your goal is to help people heal, that's the last thing you want to do. You want to be true to who you are so that you like who you are.
Love that. So having had access to this spirit world, I don't know really the terminology for it, but
it's a good terminology.
Okay. So what do we get wrong about life?
Well, I think people are looking for a soul path, and it's really common for them to come to me and, what's my soul path? And we're searching for that right thing. Well, that's not a soul path. A soul path is self-love and self-acceptance. That's our true soul path. And so I think that's what they get wrong most often. Our life path is everything else. And that takes us to our soul path, right? But when we come here, we innately are able to love others. And so that little story that you hear out there that, if you don't love yourself, you can't love others, I don't agree with that at all. I believe that we are innately able to love others. It's loving ourselves that's so difficult. For whatever reason, I can't tell you that reason, but it's there. And we're so hard on ourselves. So the goal is to start gaining self-love. And then we're on that right soul path. And when I tell people that, they get relieved because they think it's something they're supposed to be doing outside of them. And healing is an inside job. And people also believe that their souls are damaged. And I have a real problem with that. So they say soul wounds. And, I honor everyone's belief system, but if we don't have somewhere to go inside of us to heal, that is soul healed, we're in trouble because we're supposed to go inward to heal ourselves, not outward. And that's even if we're guiding someone, we're guiding them to go inside of themselves. Well, if everything's damaged, our brain, our heart, our spirit, and our soul, we're in big trouble. So what I tell people is, the breath of life, spirit, that can be hurt, damaged, broken. Our hearts can be hurt, damaged, broken, and our brains can be really dysfunctional and distorted. But our souls are perfectly pure, and it's a vine to the spirit world.
That's so beautiful. I'm just thinking of, myself at certain times and probably others. It's so hard to attune to ourselves, I think. And I think that there's a resistance to do that because it's scary, right? And I think, going back to addictions, there's so many other addictions now, social media, technology, like we can go through the entire day without once really being present in our bodies. So I think this concept of like your soul and attuning to all of that is probably just so daunting. So how do you walk people through that? Or how do you recommend the listeners start to attune to that?
Well, I think attuning to the spirit world has a 3-step process, like most things. We have an awareness that they're there, and they become aware that we're aware. So maybe our hair stands on end. Maybe the room gets cold. Maybe we feel their energy, or we're thinking of them and we feel like they're next to us. And we allow that. And so we become aware. And then we get into acceptance. I'm going to accept that something's different in this room. I feel it. I sense it. I know it. I just don't know what that is. Instead of going to fear base, go to acceptance. And then that action, which is trust. I'm going to trust something's going on here. Well, the whole time the spirit world's going, okay, she's accepting I'm here. She's aware I'm here. And now she's going to trust it. Right or wrong, she's going to trust it. So I'm going to come on. I'm going to come in. I'm going to do whatever that thought was that they said it wasn't me, that they just thought that. Now I'm going to do it that way. So even if you're wrong, they'll start showing you in different ways once you get to that space. We fear what we don't understand, and that's the big issue. And again, what we fear, we feed. So of course, we're going to go the other direction. We're feeding it. But my goal is to get people to release the fear and their limiting thoughts or beliefs and just let it be. Life's in session. We need to be present. And if we're present, we're going to see things differently. So I go through my day as much as I can, not driving here, but as much as I can, being present. And that changes my path. Of what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing, what is my soul telling me? I'm tapping into that always so that I can be aware of what's around me.
You referenced spirit. What is the difference, or is there a difference between spirits and people who have passed?
Spirits are people who have passed.
Okay.
So when I was on the other side, what I saw were guides, deities, angels, which is not a religious connotation. I want to be very clear. They crossed me over and brought me back. And it was not a religious feeling at all. It was just pure love, unconditional love. And then there's the spirits. The spirits are our loved ones, our animals, the spirits. So think about your breath of life is your spirit. So if you think about how the soul comes and seats inside the heart, which, by the way, the heart has 40,000 neurons. It carries memory, learning capacity. Our brains don't go with us. So all the memories that we have as a loved one is going through our heart memory. Those beautiful neurons, they call it a mini brain. It actually speaks to the brain more than the brain speaks to the heart, which is phenomenal to me. They found this out scientifically. This is proven. And that's what goes with us. So our loved ones do remember us. They have that memory base. It's just not the brain. The brain's got so much junk in it. It's so distorted. If we took that, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
We'd be depressed and we'd be,
Yeah, thank God we don't take that.
I know. But our heart is love. And and that's why it can be broken, because it's love. And it carries those memories. It goes with us with our soul. So those souls I call spirit.
Okay, I'm thinking of this experience that I had. Maybe you can tell me if this is anything. But I was at my parents' house last year, and it was just so vivid. I've never experienced anything like it. I wasn't even thinking of anybody. And, there have been just a few people in my life who have been close to me who I've lost. But I was sitting, I remember, on their couch, and all of a sudden I got this freezing cold gust of wind. And I had goosebumps and my hair was standing up. So much so to the point it was January on the East Coast. I was like, oh, I must have left the front door open, and it blew open because it was that, visceral of a feeling. And I got up, all the doors, windows, everything were shut. But that was it. But I was like, that is the strangest thing that's ever happened to me.
But you became aware.
Yeah.
And that's how they start. They start making you aware. So you thought it was something else, and then you recognized it wasn't. And what was that? And that's how they start tapping into you. I find that a lot of people that have forms of addiction are very intuitive and extremely gifted in the field of being able to tap into the spirit world. It's just a matter of whether they want to. And whether they'll accept it. And so at that moment, you were in some form of acceptance that something is different here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that gives them the opening.
Uh-huh.
Now, and people say to me, I don't want them to, know what I'm doing. I'm doing private things, whatever it is they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them they're not interested in your human activities. They're interested in your soul and tapping into the love that they feel for you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know that, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to put away that fear and you start accepting that that's what happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a signal for me that a spirit was around you.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like a spiritual either grandmother or grandfather for me, but I think it was your grandmother, if I may be honest with you. She was sitting in your energy and she loves to be in your energy. She's in your energy right now. I'm sorry. This woman loves you.
Oh my gosh.
Loves you. You're her little girl. You're her baby girl. And she's kind and she's strong. I do want to say that. She's not weak. I don't see her over in a corner sitting, staring. She's strong, but she's kind and she knows how to love and she's a matriarch.
Mm-hmm.
And she just wanted you to know that she loves you so much.
Mm-hmm. Whoa. That's crazy because that's what I thought at the time.
She was the one.
Wow.
That's what I was just going to say. She was the one. So she was loving being in your energy,
Mm-hmm.
and you recognized that she was in your energy. So now, as you go through the journey, as you get those kinds of feelings, you'll know it's her.
Mm-hmm.
You'll know it's her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, to what you were saying about addicts, having this kind of intuition, I've always just thought that I'm like hypersensitive. And as a result, I'm kind of hyper attuned to myself and everybody else. And I do feel intuitive. But as far as, people that I've lost, like I don't know. I think that one, my grandmother and my grandfather on my mom's side were hard for me because they died when I was in my addiction. So I never said goodbye, and they never got to see this version of myself. But anytime I think of them, the first thought that comes to my head is they're here. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if we all just kind of innately have that,
know.
There's like that saying in recovery, deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. I'm not religious, but I kind of think of God as, spirituality. So we all have this inside us. And I have always attributed that to where that thought comes from. Like, oh, they're here. Like when somebody dies, I'm like, they're here. And that's just my knee-jerk reaction. And then I go, wait, why am I saying that?
Because
it's like
they are.
Then my thinking my brain starts
There's
to
your limiting beliefs.
Exactly.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So when you do that, if you just say, I'm going to accept that, even if you don't fully trust it, I'm going to accept it. And then just walk in that. And you'd be surprised what you see. I don't know which one of them like gardening, but I'm seeing them in the garden and I feel like they're sending you hummingbirds and butterflies. I feel like this is going to keep coming to you the rest of your journey.
Wow.
You understand?
Yes. Yeah. My grandmother. Yeah. And I just bought a house 2 days ago and there's hummingbirds everywhere.
Yeah. Well, they'll also act differently. So the ones that she's sending, you always see hummingbirds. And that's what I tell people. They go, well, we all see hummingbirds, right? And yes, we do. But this will feel different, just like that feeling you had. You've had wind on you before, you've gotten cold before, but this felt different.
Yeah.
The hummingbird will feel different. It will act different. It will interact with you differently. It might buzz around your head or, sit and look at you, which they don't do.
Yeah.
They don't like to be near our skin. So, and then you go, oh, and also I tell people, if you see a hummingbird and you just think it's a hummingbird, great, it's a hummingbird. But that one time that you go, God, I just thought of my grandma. She's put that in your head. They love that.
Yeah.
But it's really comforting to know they can't see anything private and they can't read our minds. Yeah. I do want to say that again because I think people panic about that. Yeah. It's like I have private things I don't want anybody seeing. And I'd lose my mind if I thought they could see everything I do because I see spirits all the time. So, but your grandmother, she's your person and you're hers. And it will always be that way. So if you think that dies, it's inaccurate.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It can't. We don't die. We leave this physical body, but we don't die. And it's hard to conceptualize that. I think we're not supposed to know because if I think everyone knew, they'd never stay here.
Yeah.
They just leave.
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell you were talking about how people tell you you're really sensitive or you're highly sensitive. The truth is you are a sensitive. And if I were you, that's how I'd respond. You're accurate. I am a sensitive. I feel things around me. This is a very powerful statement that takes you to the place of acceptance of that and allows you the freedom to be that beautiful person that you are, which is an empathic energy. not an empath to the negative, empath to the positive. You feel things around you. You know when someone's in pain. You know when they're going to suffer. You know if they're mean, if they're, you know all these things when you're not medicated. Well, a lot of empaths want to medicate themselves.
Yeah.
Because that's a safety mechanism from feeling all of that energy around them. They don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
We lose many of them to suicide, et cetera, because they don't know what to do with it. So it's so important that gets out there in the world, that they understand that there is an answer to that. And they need to look it up, the traits of an empath. And they'll find who they are. They'll be blown. They'll be blown. It'll be like, that's me, which is really cool.
Do most people who come to you, are the majority of them dealing with grief? And is it usually death, or is it heartbreak, or?
All of it.
Okay.
All of it. Death is the most difficult of grief. So I liken it to the lowest of vibration. Like sloths aren't low vibrating internally, but they move very slowly. So I'll say that. If you picture a sloth being at a very low vibration because they're in the deepest of grief. So we're the sloth, right? And a medium might be the hummingbird because they're vibrating higher from whatever experience they had or that they've taught themselves to. And then the loved ones are the hummingbirds. Well, by the time the hummingbird is moved 60,000 places, the sloth still hasn't turned its head. It goes so slow. So you're missing all of it. So grief is a very powerful entity. It is, like I said, in the corner doing push-ups. It's waiting for you. You're standing in the grocery store. Nothing's wrong. Everything's okay. You had a loss. And all of a sudden you burst into tears looking at the can of beans. That's grief running for you. Okay. And it's like, I'm stepping in right now. So grief is a very powerful thing. And we think we can control it, and we're in charge of it. And the truth is, grief's in charge of you. It decides when it's going to put you to the end of it, or if there is an end, or help you heal. You don't get to decide that. And when you know that, you allow it. You step into it and allow, and when you do that, you move through your grief. So people come to me for all reasons of grief. And, we grieve from the moment we're born. Truthfully, our mom takes our bee away, right? We're too big for it now. Won't let us suck our thumb. We're grieving. So we're getting prepared for these losses that are enormous. So we actually have preparation internally. We just don't know where to tap into it. So learning to do that is going to a grief counselor, how they help you tap into that knowledge that you already have of what grief looks like.
Yeah, I've heard you say that before. Grief decides when it's done with us, not vice versa. Yeah. And I also heard you say, I think, what we're controlling is controlling us, or something along those lines.
And what we run from chases us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And it's also counterintuitive because we think that we have control. And of course, we desire to control these things, and we don't want to feel grief.
I love how you put that. We think we have control. Our thinking's distorted.
Yeah.
We live on this planet.
Yeah.
The true knowing is we don't. I can't control what you're going to do right now. You could get up and walk away. I can't control. I don't have control over the next moments. We know that in our knowing, but we think differently. Because that's how we function in this world. This world is a scary place, and we have to be able to function in it. So we have to have that feeling of control. But in truth, what we try to control controls us. We can't stop thinking about it. We can't get over it. We're trying to change it and not change ourselves. It's an inside job.
Yeah.
So, and then if we run from something, it does chase us because our soul is meant to learn from the experience. So if we're running away from something, we're being chased.
Yeah.
And that chasing is the experience.
Yeah. How do you guide people through relinquishing control? Because I think that's the hardest thing.
I don't think they ever will. I think that it's a matter of what you can control is you. So what I try to do is redirect them. There's the one thing you can control. You're not going to control someone else, but you can control you. So I have this saying I love. If someone else is my problem is me. And that's the good news because I can do something about that. If I'm not the problem, there's no solution. And so I live my life when I see a problem, I go, okay, what do I need to change internally? Because I can control that. I can't control what they're doing. Nothing I do will change what they're doing. Now, how many relationships have you been in where you go, I'm not going to let you talk to me that way? And they go, well, then I am going to. Or they just do. And you stand there and think, what am I going to do with this? The question is, what are you going to do when they do it? And that's a true boundary, by the way. True boundaries are, what am I going to do when they do this behavior, because if I have to set a boundary with them, they're boundary crossers. They're going to cross it.
Right.
So I might as well not bother.
Mm-hmm.
You can try once.
Yeah. It reminds me of another recovery thing. So any perceived wisdom of mine comes from recovery, but acceptance is the answer to all my problems. And if I'm disturbed, it's because something in me needs to be changed, not you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't have any peace until you get there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I understand that one.
Yeah. So you said that you work with children who have near-death experiences. Are the experiences, are they universal in some way, or does it really depend
Well,
on
for
the person?
children, it's very similar. So I find that they want to come back and be with their families.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't had enough life experience to be daunted by it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And also, I feel like they are confused and afraid of the spirits that come in, where most adults, they understand, I had this happen. I know exactly what I experienced. I understand every bit of it. We as children have to go through our process of living to understand what they taught us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different experience in that.
Mm-hmm. As far as, if they have near-death experiences and what you experienced as well with the spirits and everything, is that universal? Because I think what I'm getting at is everybody's afraid of death, right? Or maybe not death itself, but
how they die.
Exactly. Yes. But you hear from a lot of people who have kind of been to that other side that there's really nothing to fear.
But you don't know it till you know it. You can't know what you don't know.
Again, it's the limiting beliefs and thoughts of our human
And I
resources.
think that, part of us needs to have at least a little fear, or we'd all end our lives, because this is a very difficult place to be. It has so much beauty, but it's nothing like the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want that. That's why we can't see it. Mm-hmm. We're not meant to. Mm-hmm. So I really believe that that's, the process they put us through in order to grow. We're here for soul expansion. That's it, in a nutshell. And in order to expand our soul, we have to have negative and positive. And I think actually the negatives or the seemingly bad teach us more than the positive, because we want out, right? So we're going to search the answer. Yeah. And when we're happy and cozy. So I think it's a better teacher. So this is our experiential place. We come here to experience that so our soul can expand. Because the more our soul expands, the more knowledge we have, the more beauty we have spiritually.
Mm-hmm. I love that you said the seemingly bad. I picked up on that because, the seemingly bad is often the best thing for us, to your point.
Yes.
And I talk about that a lot because I look back on my own life, my addiction and alcoholism, and that nearly killed me, and other things that I've gone through both in and out of sobriety that I thought would be the worst things to ever happen to me were the best things for me, because they got me, to where I am and built character and all of that.
But you chose that.
Yeah.
You made that choice. It's part of your character. Mm. There are people that go through things, and if I were to say this to a mother who lost their child, they would not agree with this.
Yeah.
Right? But what I tell them is, because I work with a lot of that, and what I tell them is that you will make good of the bad in order to survive. Mm. And so you'll create something. I don't know what it will be. Maybe it will be you'll have a charity for your child, or you'll get their name in lights, or you'll save other children because of it. Whatever that is will come to you, and you will create good from that horrible, horrible experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I heard you talk about this as well, that people come to you and they ask why. That's what everybody asks, right? When something bad happens. And I think you said, it's not really the why, it's the what and the how. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I've known a lot of the whys. I figured out a lot of the whys, and it didn't heal me.
Right.
It just answered the question why.
Right.
But when I know what has happened, what I need to do differently, and how to do that is when I begin the healing. Mm. So if I need to know the why, I can get it, but it really isn't the thing that's going to catapult me into healing. Mm-hmm. But if you tell me what is happening and how I can change it, I'm going to jump on it because I want to feel okay. We innately want to feel good.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have a book coming out, right?
I do.
It comes out in June.
July 16th.
Oh, July. Okay. Tell everybody about that.
Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons. It's wisdom from the spirit world on living, dying, and the in-between. It was written with me in spirit. I believe that 100%, but it's phenomenal. It is. Anyone who reads it says they don't want to put it down. Mm-hmm. It's all about, it talks about my experience, what I saw, what I have done with my life with that. It talks about the pure love of spirit. It has exercises at the end. It talks about harnessing your fear, harnessing intuition, all those things that we want so badly to understand. And how does mediumship heal grief? And how do we heal grief? Mm-hmm. And what do we do with the pain that we're carrying? And what are the signs? All of those things it talks about. And then at the end of each chapter, there's integration moments to look at your life. When did I see that? When did that happen to me? And then exercises to make it happen for you. And what I'm going to be doing, which is really cool, I'm really excited about this, is if they pre-sell it, or they buy it the first month it's out, I'm going to be doing 13 Zooms to do the 13 chapters, one a month, to go through the exercises with the people who do that.
Amazing.
I know.
And when can they pre-order?
They can pre-order now.
Okay,
they can go
good.
to Barnes & Noble. Okay. They can go to Hudson Books, Penguin Random House. They can go anywhere they choose. This is a Hay House.
Mm-hmm. Love Hay House.
Yeah, I love Hay House. They're the publishers, so yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, it's so great meeting you. And where can everybody find you?
SusanGrau.com. It's GRAU, SusanGrau.com. They can go to Susan Grau Official on any social media and they'll find me. And I think that's pretty much it. Those are the best places.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful.